I'll put that on my Rubik's Cube. I'm almost done solving it.
Do it on the show.
Okay.
So we start the show with Dave doing a Rubik's Cube.
Oh, we started.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
When
Hello.
you talk over my intro, that's what happens.
That's what happened.
That was
See?
Dave's fault.
Solved.
Whoa, you switched out the Rubik's Cube.
I did not.
Yes, you did. It's off
If you
screen.
want, I'll mix it up on camera and fix it like while you're talking, Shaun.
Okay, mix it up more. Show it to me when it's adequately mixed up.
It doesn't really matter.
Oh, it matters.
All right.
I want you to be like 1,800 steps from solving it and then
The
solve
funny
it.
thing is, it doesn't really matter how little I mean, it does matter a little bit how my messed up is, but really once it's messed up, it takes the same amount of steps. See? Sufficiently randomized.
Okay, that's pretty good. All right, now get to work.
Okay, I'll listen to you while I do that.
Now we will do the intro.
Okay.
I'm just gonna put
Welcome, everyone, to another exciting episode
Of?
of Objection Network.
You almost said at the buzzer, didn't you?
Oh, that was going to be the first one I wanted. And I still got the name wrong. I'm a terrible brand champion.
You're just terrible.
September 3rd, 2020, episode 451. This is the standard to which we're going to hold ourselves this week, so stay tuned for that. And that's...
No, we have a great show planned.
Oh.
Don't listen to Chris. What? You're going to listen to this guy just because he gets things like the date right, the name of the show right?
I was just
Like-
giving you a chance to redeem yourself as brand manager, so this is good. I like to see the energy, because if you've been like, yeah, you know what, this show is going to suck, I'd be like, get out.
Exactly.
You gotta self-promote a little
In
bit.
fact, please turn off. Just unsubscribe. No, we have a great show. So we have been trying to. We've recommended some games for Dave, and it's been going pretty well, actually. We recommended God of War, Persona 5, Red Dead 2, mostly Red Dead 2, with the caveat that you had to play 1 to get to 2.
Mm-hmm.
I think Chris would actually disagree with that. He really likes 1. Anyways, point is, we are at the point now, the critical junction, where we can now recommend a new game, and we don't really have like the slam dunks that I felt like we had before. So it gets tricky.
So
And I'm going to be honest, we get along way too much lately. Like, what is this? Where was the fighting from earlier where we all hated each other? And I want to get back to those days. So we are going to compete to recommend the new game for Dave.
when did anyone hate Chris?
That's a good point. Well, we have to start somewhere.
We all hated each other, Shaun and I. Like, up in this corner up here, it was Shaun and I that hated
No.
each other.
I'm just saying it's a competition. We want it to be a competition. Because, like, when we need to bring back, like, Marry for Buck Kill. And now here's the problem. That takes a lot of work to prepare for. And it's easy to just come on and be like, hey, what's up, guys?
How are things going?
Yeah.
You
I
might be
saw the
thinking,
Cube. Check this out.
it's easy to just pick 3 names out of a hat, but there was a lot more careful curation to that. It wasn't just 3 random names.
Yeah. That wouldn't be exciting or interesting for you.
Like, if it was 3 random names, it wouldn't have to include a kid. And that's a part of the planning process for whatever list gets given to me, so it takes some prep.
You would be shocked how much prep those interviews took, where I asked just what seems like the most inane questions in history. That was a lot of prep for that. And if we ever brought on a guest ever again, which we also may not, we can see it again. Anyways, I've done some prep. I have my handy dandy smartphone.
While you pull that up, I will say it almost seems like it'd be easier now than ever before to do an interview segment, because so many people are used to doing them via Zoom or Skype or Microsoft Teams or whatever these days. It's like it's old hat now. I mean, the late night shows are doing it, so why couldn't we?
I know, but it's a lot of work to get the people.
Oh yeah.
Although, everyone that we've interviewed on the show was surprisingly easy, except for when we tried to get what's his face.
Phoenix Jones.
Phoenix Jones never came on the show, and he was basically like, "Yeah, if you pay me $1 million." So we're like,
Well,
it's like anyone else is paying you $1 million. Why us?
Not all of them were slam dunks either, as far as like quality of interview, though.
Dave, you can't go on and bash the people in the interview.
I'm not sure they're listening anymore, and they already did the interview, so what does it matter?
I mean, that's true. That's bad form, though.
yeah, we interviewed an author for an uncompleted book.
I wonder if he ever completed that book. I think it was a zombie book.
You actually
No,
interviewed two authors.
not that one. The very first interview we did.
Oh, yeah.
exactly. There was two. One became a host on the show, and the other one never finished his book. I should have looked it up a year or so ago, and he never finished it.
Well, easy come, easy go.
Anyways, I have my list ready to go, Dave. And here's your role in this. I want you to ask questions. We are trying to curate this for you. And so I need you to be on top of your game with what you're looking for and what you're trying to complete. Now, the next game you're going to play is Persona 5. And I understand that, again, Royal. Which is like a little crazy to me, but I'm not going to bash you for it because it's a great game. So that's fine.
And we both did it too. So
we did it, but mine had a big gap. You just finished it. But that's okay. It's a great game.
If you guys if we could find a way to give me the save state of the new content and that's about it, I might just do that, but I'm not sure how easy that is. So
yeah, just do the whole thing. It's worth it to go through the whole thing. There are nice updates.
And you can fast forward to the parts you've done that aren't changed. You'll be able to tell pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So we're gonna, Chris, call heads or tails to go first, unless you just want me to go first.
Yeah, I'm supposed to call it in the air. You have to flip.
Sorry.
So it can't be right. Tails. Fuck.
Yes. Okay, I'm gonna go first. Dave, my first suggestion for you is Final Fantasy 12.
That's not an MMO, right?
No. 11 and
is,
14.
14 is. 12 might as well be sometimes with its combat, but it's actually not. No.
Yeah. Okay. So actually, it is kind of a combat similar to that. It's I told you it's like Knights of the Old Republic. Are you taking note? What's happening right now? Are you on like a
doing
work?
The Rubik's
Cube.
Yeah,
that's
you gave him an assignment, and now he's distracted.
Okay, I need you to focus on Final Fantasy 12 though too.
He's almost done. You could tell the colors were getting there.
See?
Yeah. God damn it. So Final Fantasy 12. You like 10, and you've played like more than I realized you did actually. I know you played the early ones and you played 10, but when you rattled off the list, you were like, oh yeah, like pretty much all of them up through 10.
1, 6, 7, most of 9, 10. Yeah.
Most of 9, that's a problem, but that's okay.
I know. I always wanted to finish it. I just never went back to do it.
But let's be honest, that's about the list most people in America have. Mm-hmm. Now, in the years past, they've gone back and re-released some of the early stuff that we didn't get, like 2, 3, because our 2, 3, of course, were 4, 6.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, that list is really fairly complete, all things considered. Like, I don't begrudge you for not having played 5. Like, I haven't played 5.
I started 8 and I didn't like it.
It's a little rough.
Yeah, most people don't like 8, so you're not really alone there.
I actually want to go off on why I don't like 8, but that's a story for another time. The story sucks. So for 12,
stealing from monsters. That's why
12 has everything you need, Dave. Everything you would look for in a game. So let's go down the list. One of the best stories in Final Fantasy history. Super good. I would say easily one of the most mature stories. It's not like, Game of Thrones. I don't mean mature like that, but like they respect you as an audience member. There's a little more gravity to the storytelling. It's not so like poppy and, a little cat boy grabbing girls' asses like in 9. There's a lot of cool stuff happening. It's pretty political. And it asks some really interesting questions. There's like at some point there's like an atomic bomb analogous thing, and the questions kind of have to ask like, do we use this? What do we do with it? And it's really well done.
I would also say along those lines, top to bottom, it has one of the better casts in a Final Fantasy game. Now, the reason I say that is primarily because of the top-to-bottom nature, because let's be honest, even in the games that I've loved in the Final Fantasy series, I don't love everybody who's in the party.
No.
Like, I didn't walk away from 10 going, man, I sure loved Waka.
But John DiMaggio.
Like, he's fine. He's also kind of an even bigger racist than you remember when you go back and look at it.
No,
You're like,
bad. It's real bad.
Like, you're like, damn, like, if this was about actual races and not a fantasy race, I should be pretty offended about what he's coming out of his mouth. And the same thing with, like, 6. There's some characters I love in 6, and then, like, I'm trying to think of, like, a bad example. I guess, like, Strago.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They're kind of like, why are you guys here?
Like, he's fine, but, it doesn't really do much for me. 12, I think, just there's not really a character I dislike in that cast. Just about everybody I like to really like.
So, questions. Is it set more in a modern or medieval setting?
It's kind of traditional Final Fantasy in that there's some medieval and some tech splashed in.
But less tech. It's more on the medieval side than like Final Fantasy 7 and 8, where that's quite a bit more on the industrial side. Okay. This is like definitely more medieval, more magic.
the battle system.
Okay, so the battle system is like Knights of the Old Republic. So you queue up an attack, and it, well, okay, I'll leave out the gambit system for right now. You queue up an attack, and then when your meter reaches full, you do the attack. Other than that, it's free control on the movement, and it's like is there a word for that? Like active battle, sort of. It's not real time, but it's active battle system.
There's some terminology for it. I forget what they called it.
I know they called the active battle system in 7. That's what they call it, the active battle system in 7, but it was still turn-based.
It's still turn-based.
Yeah.
This is like kind of turn-based, but less so because the meters fill so fast. And like, so you'll queue up like a special attack or a magic, but between that, your meter still fills for like regular attacks. So it's like, wow, it's like nice old Republic, kind of that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Now the gambit system, I really like. It's divisive, I will say. You can program a bunch of if-then commands into your character so that it kind of automates fighting for you. And for the most part, unless you're fighting a boss, it kind of works for all combat. So like you can do... when you see an enemy, target closest enemy. You can have the party target the one that the party leader is targeting. They all go fighting. And then you can say, if HP gets less than 50%, use cure. And you just kind of send them off and they just like do it. And you're kind of like a manager, almost like overseeing your party fight rather than having to input every time.
Interesting. So it's more... Yeah, that's like I said, manager. I guess that's the right thing. So there's not. It seems like there's a mix where you can have the combat, and also, but if you want to, also have other people go do it for you, almost.
Pretty much, yeah. And what's nice about the gambit system, you don't have to use it at all. At all. You can completely ignore it, but I think it's really fun, and it does kind of speed up to where if you play 12 nowadays, you can fast forward combat, which is so nice. You can just kind of grind, and your characters are going to act in the ways that you told them to act, and it's pretty rewarding. Like when you can facilitate not needing to do anything because you've done the pre-work and programming everything, it feels great.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, and then you can speed through it, so I like those types of things.
The tricky part about the gambit system is that game knowledge is helpful. So when it's a little bit overwhelming, I think, for some newcomers, because you're like, okay, but I don't really know exactly what kind of situations I'm going to be in, or what types of actions I might want to input for those scenarios. Those develop over time, and that comes with any RPG battle system. I mean, obviously, the familiarity comes the more you're used to it, but that is a bit of a limiting factor for newcomers.
Chris is right. Do you like how much vitriol we have?
Yeah. So far, I've only been supporting your pick. I haven't been turning it down at all.
Chris is right. The only thing I will say, and this is a pro and a con, they introduce you pretty slowly to the gambit system, but the con is... the way that they do this is you actually have to buy the like commands, the if-then sequences, and sometimes like you'll be at a point where you know what you want to do and you just don't have that command yet, and that's kind of annoying. But other than that, it's really well done. Do you have another question? I'm ready to launch into another part about it. I'm
trying to think of any other questions, but like, so far, I mean, you're taking a series that I like, Final Fantasy, comparing it to the battle system of one of my top 5 games of all time, Knights of the Republic. So far, it's selling me.
Okay, so the last thing is you're probably wondering, Dave, how it compares to the Sphere Grid. I have heard not as well, but I think it's very good, and it's much better in the remake. So in the original, you had a license board, okay? So imagine a Sphere Grid, but on a chessboard.
But it's squares instead of circles.
It's squares instead of circles. But imagine in the Sphere Grid, you had no idea what you were building toward.
That's not good.
Yeah. So this was a board. Only when you uncover a piece of the board do you see the adjacent tiles. So you don't really know what you're building toward until you put in points and it opens up. So you had to play with a guide. And if you're playing with a guide, and that's the only way to do it, why didn't the programmers just put it in there to begin with? Baffles me. Nowadays, you know what the board is. So that's really helpful. What I like is there's more customization in the first, in the original game. Each character kind of had a board set for them. Now you can choose any board for any character. You can then, at some point in the game, choose a second board. And that unlocks so much cool shit because you can get these really cool cross classes. I had my Ash, who's the best character in the game, bar none. I had her go down like a paladin, like knight path, and then a white mage path. So I made her like a holy knight. She had all the magic for healing, and then she had power. It was almost a problem actually because she was my best at damage, but she was also the healer. So like that wasn't optimal, but it was fun.
This is Yuna going down Lulu's path for me in Final Fantasy X.
Yeah,
he was like,
right.
"Oh, you're overpowered."
Yeah, exactly. You can make Vaughn, the main character, really beefy in like swords classes. So you kind of like that you can unlock the same board twice if you really want to specialize. I don't think that's as fun, and you don't need to min-max. The final boss for me was really funny because there's a lot of like shit talking and blah, blah, and then I like hit him and like I think 3 attacks he was dead. But it was fun to get there, and I love that manipulation of different classes for games. I love story, I love characters, but I also love really getting into the RPG elements and the leveling up and the class system, and this really scratched that itch for me.
I mean, all good so far. I think it was weird because I started Final Fantasy 14 as well, and I never got into that, and I wonder if it was more of the active like slashing battle system that was my problem with it. So I feel like if you got a queue up actions type of thing like you're describing, I think that'll be more fun for me.
You're like me in that regard. You mean 15? And
yes, sorry.
In 15, I don't really love the active combat style either. I'm kind of a turn-based person. It's what I've got into Final Fantasy IV. So I'll admit that I think 15's combat is good. It never really resonated with me all that well.
I enjoyed 15 in spite of the combat, not because of it.
So this at least kind of splits that difference. It resembles turn-based. It's not exactly a full-on turn-based experience, but it's at least close enough. And with the management, you can mirror it a little bit. It's reminiscent of it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about negatives. Number 1.
Okay.
The soundtrack.
Yeah,
is
it's forgettable.
Inoffensive in that nothing about it stands out whatsoever. It is by far the most forgettable Final Fantasy soundtrack. I don't think it's close.
Sounds like Breath of the Wild in that sense, where it's like, oh yeah, I guess there's kind of music there.
Essentially, but worse. Because at least Breath of the Wild, there were a few different standout tracks where when it really mattered, the game brought it. 12 might be the most indistinguishable video game soundtrack of any game I've ever played.
At best, you'll say, oh, this fits the world. And that's it.
And it's not like it's bad.
Yeah, it's just like fine. It's there.
It's not even noticeable. It's really bizarre to me, especially because, as much as the 13 series gets shit on, 13 had some really good songs across those 3 games. And obviously there's plenty of other music across the entire Final Fantasy series that have become beloved by video game aficionados. And I'm not saying there aren't people who love songs from 12 or even a couple good tracks in 12, but like, man, I think about that whole soundtrack and I'm like, what were we doing? Where are the hooks?
Yeah.
How is there an entire game soundtrack without a single goddamn hook?
Yeah. The main character, I like him. I've heard he takes a while to warm up to. He's kind of a brat at first.
Then again, you can argue that several different Final Fantasy protagonists start off as a little bit of a brat. Cloud, Titus.
You have a great party. And I feel like they do a pretty good job. If you want to like switch them out, you can. Kind of like 10 did. Now, also in 10, I didn't do a lot of that. So I also didn't do it in 12. It made me, you can only have 3 party members. It made me, I wish it was 4. 4 would have felt really good. Maybe that would have thrown off the balance. I don't know. But for all of the customization at my fingertips, being only really able to do it with my main 3 was like kind of disappointing.
Another negative. I'm Captain Bosch of Dalmasca.
Some of the side quests are like, what am I doing?
Some people love that scene, and I'm like, why? Because you like being an obnoxious tool? Is that why?
Oh, God. Captain Bosch is so
Don't listen to Ondor's lies.
It's really good. I would say a couple of the dungeon designs are not great. There's one near the end that is... It's too dense. It's like one of those ones where like you go on one thing and you teleport to another thing, and half the battle is just trying to remember like, wait, where does this piece go? And the map doesn't really do a great job of helping, so it's just very confusing. But yeah, overall, it's great. I feel like, Dave, just so you know, this was a game that was really big on. Sometimes games do buffs, and sometimes they ignore them, and sometimes they're critical. This is a game where buffs are critical. They design them to be exploited and to have you be aware of them, and a lot of times it's the difference between success and failure.
That is a negative for me.
Well, but it's fun. It's
Okay.
fun. If I remember correctly, you don't just go in throwing a bunch of stuff and seeing what works. You normally kind of know what the strategy is when you go into it, and that's the point. Is there is strategy when you go into a fight. It's not always just about beating the shit out of a giant turtle.
All right.
So yeah, there's a hunt system that's really good. Like kind of on the side for side missions. You don't have to, but I think they're fun. The level up on the weapons is really satisfying because they're tied to the class. It's just great. One of the best Final Fantasies. It is aged like fine wine too. For as divisive as it was when it came out, it is super good now. And it's only gotten better from the remasters.
Is this PS4 remake now?
A few different
PS4
systems.
and Switch.
Okay. Oh, okay. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know. Well,
That's all the time we have, so I guess
Yep.
Dave will be playing Final Fantasy 12.
No. It's your turn, Chris. I know. I there's one I want you to go into. God damn it! That's a third one that you had.
Just to prove you, I can do it.
He finished the Rubik's Cube again for the people who are not watching.
I want the camera to fall and just like be Rubik's cubes
6
all over your
Rubik's
floor,
cubes.
like all
Oh,
solved,
shit, my secret's out.
half solved, half not.
I didn't come into this with a list.
Well, there was one that you brought up.
Mhm.
You had initially when I realized this could be a fun segment, you had brought up Skyrim, and I was
Mhm.
like, oh, I think mine is better, but I'm intrigued by the idea of Skyrim.
So the biggest point is to market this to Dave, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna like this game, Dave.
Sold. Let's do it, guys.
The things that you really enjoyed about the Fallouts that you've played, which isn't all of them, but it's the more modern ones for the most part.
3, 4, New Vegas.
Did you play 76? No, you didn't, because we would have stopped you. We would have had an intervention and been like, Dave, you only have so much time in the day.
We did stop him. He was asking us what 76 was, and we were like, no, stop. No.
I did ask. I was like, so Fallout 76 came out. How is it? No!
I've heard that 2 years later, there is a somewhat salvageable experience in there now. I'm still not going to spend any time on it whatsoever. But
There's a semblance of a game now.
Mm-hmm.
They have they added some crazy new things in there, Dave, like NPCs and quests and dialogue.
Yeah,
Okay, please spend about 60 seconds explaining why the hell this game is so bad.
Oh,
because they tried to make a multiplayer game out of a franchise that's been exclusively single player, and they didn't include any of the things that made people like the franchise in its single player version.
Done. All right.
Yeah, that's the big one.
Like 6 seconds.
Why even almost call it Fallout? Except for the setting, you've done none of the traits that the series is known for and well liked for. And you can almost argue 4 didn't even do a good job of that, but now you went totally away from that.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like they should have just put that multiplayer game on 4, like Red Dead and Grand Theft Auto 5 did.
Yep.
And no one would have been mad. But now when you release a new game to make people buy it,
You're
makes
hitting
you
the
mad.
core of it. Yeah.
Exactly.
People liked Fallout Shelter more than they liked Fallout 76. I want you to think about that for a minute.
Yep.
That's on your phone, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. That's
So, Chris, sorry, Chris.
No, that's fine.
I mean, Chris brings up a good point, though, that, like, if I was wary of Skyrim, you have played the first-person RPG before.
Mhm.
So that's a huge, like, foot in the door.
I mean, I never finished it, but like I even enjoyed playing Fable, and I never finished it, but it's still fun. Like I never had a solid Xbox 360 or I think it was Xbox was the original. I never had I always had an old Xbox that never worked properly, so I never finished it.
I played the first 3 Fable games primarily just for the multiplayer part of, I guess, 2 and 3 mainly. They're fine.
3 is really good. I like 3 a lot.
3 is the winner of the bunch, but all of them are like I don't know,
They're
B minus,
yeah.
and 3 is maybe a B plus. Like they're fine. Where Skyrim excels in comparison to the Fallouts is 2 things to me. One is side quests, which we talked about last week at length. To me, I think Skyrim has even better ones than any of the Fallout games, including 3 and New Vegas, which have some pretty stellar ones. and also it's leveling in its skill tree.
I'm so glad you hit on that.
Now, there's obviously the leveling up system in the Fallout games that you're familiar with the Pip-Boy and leveling up certain stats, like the main stats and some ancillary stats. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's a solid system, but Skyrim's is much better, particularly because it rewards you for exploring trees in the areas that you really want to use. I have played a stealth archer, and all 3 times I've gone through that game, I've loved every minute of it. I've tried other versions of it. I've tried going two-handed combat, and I enjoy that too. But I just really, really like diving hard into the skill trees that I enjoy and then getting more and more powerful because of it. Other games obviously have done this. I don't know that one has done it as well as Skyrim.
So, like, Dave, if you, like, quite literally, if you pickpocket a lot, your pickpocket skill goes up.
Makes sense.
You don't pour points into skills. You do the skill, and that makes the skill increase.
It's almost like you're practicing it.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, actually. It's very intuitive.
What makes it work the best in my book is that you get better at things by doing them, which already then is a nice feedback loop of getting rewarded for things that you enjoy doing or are doing, but you also have some control over it because you get a point to put into these trees anytime you level. So you get better at certain stuff just by doing it. You get harder to detect the more you sneak around just by default. But then if you really want to invest in stealth because you're diving into that gameplay, you put your level points into that to make it even more powerful. Because sometimes you get those systems where you only get better at something by doing it. If you have a bad starting stat, it'll feel bad sometimes because you're like, I suck at this. To get good at it, I'm going to have to slough through badness to get to be good and then really good. Not as much the case here because you can devote your points in certain ways that work out a lot better.
Yeah. Well, and that works out, for me, because I am kind of that way where I don't... Fallout, I've never played a stealth type of person in Fallout because I've always been terrible at it, basically. I'm impatient, I guess is the best word for it. So if you get rewarded for doing something better, it's more of that incentive to try harder on it and be a little more patient with it. So
yeah. I love it. I love well, here's a big question that we need to ask you, Dave. When you play Fallout, are you the type who like pickpockets everybody, hoards a bunch of shit, sneaks around all the time, or not?
No.
There's like 2 types of players in these games. The people who do that and the people who don't.
So, you ever seen the meme with Danny DeVito and it says, so I go in there, guns blazing. That's me basically in Fallout.
Okay.
So anyway, start blasting is what the meme says.
What's nice is you still definitely have that avenue. The game is built for anyone. I would encourage you to try a stealth play. It's super satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very it feels very accessible. They're not super punishing with the stealth. It's pretty generous for the most part, and it's so satisfying.
Yeah, I can see that. I've just never done that in previous iterations of games, probably because it's one of those like, well, I can just kill them. That's faster.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Well, right. Well, the stealth helps you kill them faster too.
Yes,
so there's that too. I play one-handed sword with a little bit of stealth mixed in, so I can like backstab people. I love that. Chris is the Archer, also great, very satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
When you play it, the main story is it's fine. Part of why it is a struggle is not even their fault. It's hard to pace a game when you'll do one main quest and then come back like 3 years of game time later and do like the next main quest because there's so much good side stuff to do. So you kind of lose the narrative drive, but it's worth it because specifically the Thieves Guild, the Dark Brotherhood, the Assassination Guild, and even the Fighting Guild, like whatever that's called, that's fine. It's fun usually.
The vampire content's interesting. The werewolf content's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
it's all the side like guilds is the best part, and then you can do the Daedric side quest. Don't do every side quest by any means, but like all the Daedric stuff is really good. There's these like chaotic princes. I kind of got into this on our last episode. That's great. I love how the world feels huge, but it's very accessible, so you don't feel like, what am I doing? Where am I going? It's there for you to explore as much as you would like to, and it's cool because of like when you find a really good sword, you feel like you're the only person on the planet who has that sword now. That's kind of like what the game gives you the illusion of, and it feels really good.
So now I gotta make a choice between these two?
Yeah, I guess like I kind of agreed with everything Chris said, and I actually supported his pick too.
We
But
can talk about negatives real quick.
yeah, let's do that.
The game is still, even 10 years and 14 releases later, a bug-riddled mess.
You're gonna want to keep a lot of save files.
Mm-hmm.
I had a game-breaking one at one point that, thank God, I had an earlier save file that I could revert to.
Generally, these bugs err on the side of funny more than they do game-breaking, but a few game-breaking ones do exist, so you just want to make sure you're rotating saves.
That sucks.
Yeah.
It does. I've had quests I couldn't complete because an NPC glitched out too hard to do so.
Yep.
My wife abandoned me at one point for no reason. There have been some issues, and as much as I love Skyrim, it's a Bethesda game, and all Bethesda games have struggled with that, especially their open world ones, because they build all these huge things and areas you can explore and things to do, and then, well, you can't fully test all of them, right? Like, that's crazy. So that's the biggest complaint you're going to run into. The preferred way to play it is probably on PC with mods, and that's not a thing you're going to be doing. It's a minor thing in comparison. The core gameplay is still just fine on Switch or PS4 or whatever you play it on. Lord knows it's on every single goddamn system on the planet. But I think the PC one is the definitive one, and you're not going to do that. So that's a shame, because going through and making the game, like improving the textures and making all these really like scenic spots 10 times prettier was a really nice incentive for a second playthrough for me.
What's a good mod for Skyrim? Just so I know.
So this was years ago when I played it, so I'm probably not going to remember them anymore. It's probably 2014 or so when I went through the trouble of all this. The texture ones, when I remember, there are entire fan-made DLC campaigns, a couple of which get really, really good reviews.
That's cool.
There was a lot more customization was possible, like a ton of new outfits / armors. I didn't use this one, but I know some people made like unique skill trees just to even further flesh out what was already in the game. I mean, the modding community is huge, and Skyrim might be one of the biggest games that ever got that kind of support. I mean, it's enormous, the level of support Skyrim got. But all that's going to be closed off to Dave because he does not have a PC gaming rig, and also it would make most sense to have it on Switch because then you can play it wherever.
Yeah, exactly. That's so far
That's pretty cool.
I almost wanted to decide which one I was going to play based on the fact of if it was on Switch, because it's so much more portable for me. But they're both on Switch.
They're both on Switch. They're both on Switch. Even The Witcher 3, which I don't think we're going to get to today. I want to at some point. That's on Switch. How much time do we have left? We should probably call it there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or do we have time for one more?
You can talk about Witcher 3 for like 5 minutes.
No. I don't even want to do Witcher 3.
Okay.
The next one I want to try is I thought about it a lot, and especially now that you said the system, that kind of sways it for me. I would really recommend Three Houses, the Fire Emblem game.
Yeah, Fire Emblem. I've been thinking about that because you've been playing it forever, it seems. And,
I love it.
It makes it seem like, well, there's something to this game, and I had kind of dipped my toe into the Japanese heavy type of game in Persona, so
I just think
take
so.
a foot at least.
I love Awakening. I will always love Awakening. It holds a really special place in my heart. But upon going back and playing it again, I just realized that it's one of those things like Mario. Like, where would we be? Well, you wouldn't have Mario Odyssey without the original, right? Three Houses takes everything that Awakening did and gives it another like complex layer. For the most part, it's a good thing. Every once in a while, they kind of do a weird thing, or like we didn't really need this particular endeavor, but like their supports in the game is a big part of the game. People, when they fight next to each other or interact, they level up, and then you can have them talk, and they have like a little scene. In Awakening, it's pretty simplistic. In Fates, it's horrible because all anybody wants to talk about is training and fighting, and that's it. And in Three Houses, it's very complicated. You get into the lore, you see the different backstories that characters deal with. It examines the war, the caste system, everything. It's excellent. So that part's great. The graphics are great, obviously for the Switch. Like that's a great upgrade. And the fighting, the classes, the Harry Potter meets Fire Emblem, where Chris was watching me play. Was around when I was playing, and I was in the part where I'm in the school teaching my students like leveling them up in skills. You do that through class, and he was like, "That was kind of like the most fun part." And I was like, "I agree." You almost get to the fights, and the fights are almost a letdown because you just want to be in the school teaching your students.
So that's odd. You are the teacher. Your character is teaching. That is so not usual.
And you can date your students.
Which is great. A lot of your students, both the men and women, are hot.
After a time jump.
Okay. Well, that's
But
better.
you're planting the seeds when they're children. But you're also a child. So it
Teenager.
Yeah, they're all teenagers. And I think, I actually don't know what the age gap is. It can't be huge between Byleth and everybody else in the classes.
But yeah, you're the teacher, Dave. You're still part of the fighting. Like, you're leveling up. You're learning too. But when you're in the classroom, you're the teacher. And you're there's a bunch of different skills, authority, like some that make sense, like sword, axe, lance, and then other things like reason, authority, something with white magic that I forget, and that allows you to pass prerequisites to test into classes and move down the class tree.
So I have a question. I like Three Houses quite a bit. I do think it's something that I could see Dave liking. Is this the right first Fire Emblem game?
I don't know. I kind of think so in many ways, but it's also like one of the most experimental ones. Other than like genealogy, where you have like 3-hour maps.
And this is kind of a hard question for us to answer because you and I have both played several Fire Emblem games before this. But when I think back on it, I think the school part almost holds your hand too much. And combat, it almost doesn't. Like, there are battle tutorials in the early fights in this game, but I'm almost like, if I didn't know what I was doing, this would feel like a whole hell of a lot, especially the very first fight where you have control over your units and you can't even find where the unit menu is. That's my only concern with it for Dave, is that I think it is pretty accessible in a lot of ways, and again, they walk you through a lot of the new stuff really well, but I'm a little hesitant only for that reason.
It could be, but I think if you play, that's one reason I would recommend play it on normal and play it on casual. So you can play it on classic, where it's traditional Fire Emblem, where if your student dies, they're dead. They're never coming back. And I just think it's very fun to play games on that level. I've done it before. Most Fire Emblems require that. And it's fun, and it's a whole different kind of experience. I'm not in a situation where I can now waste an hour and then have a student die and either be cheated out of all their content going forward, because that's another thing. Unlike old Fire Emblems, not only are they not fighting with you anymore, you don't get all their supports, you don't get their story anymore, they're done. So then I would restart the fight, of course. I don't have time to do that anymore. So now I play on casual. It's a little less intense, but overall I enjoy it so much more. So I would say if you're playing on normal, you're playing on casual, that should give you enough to figure it out. And, overall, it's pretty basic. They don't do the trees anymore where sword beats whatever beats axe. I know lance and sword and all that. It's a little more simplified. There's a gambit system, which is a little confusing. I will even... Getting near the end of my first full playthrough, I was like, what does this do exactly? I kind of ignored it. I still think it's accessible enough. So that's something you should keep on your radar, Dave. The story is great. I played through it 3 times now. No, 4 times. I would recommend Blue Lion for the full experience, the kind of what I think is the most canon, even though they're all canon technically. You get the most cutscenes, and it seemed like the most attention was given to that path. But they're all good.
All right.
I have one more recommendation.
Okay.
I won't spend long on it.
I'm glad you want to.
It's the one I recommended at the end of the last episode.
So I have worries about that, but go ahead.
I don't have any worries about it because he's already played one and liked it.
Well, okay, I have worries. Go ahead. Go ahead and pitch it. We'll get into it.
So Phoenix Wright, Dave apparently played the first one. I'm assuming that was the base game and not the 5th case that's DLC with the phase, or not the phase. What the hell are the other 2 sisters' names?
Oh God, I don't even.
One of them ends up in a lab coat later on, and she eats things obnoxiously. And why can't I remember any of their names?
I just know Emma Sky.
Yeah, that's the ones.
Oh, okay. I didn't know they were sisters.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Well, I played. Oddly enough, I played the first one on my phone.
That's okay.
It worked. It was fine. But yeah, I played the first one on my phone. It was an app I could download on my phone. It was like
Well,
99 cents.
Did you beat it?
Yes.
Okay.
The good
Yeah.
news is, like everything else we've suggested so far, you can get the original trilogy on the Switch.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like cheap. It's like $15,
Mm-hmm.
which is really good value considering those games individually probably sold for like 30 a piece back in the day. So I just think if you enjoyed the first one, the games just continue to get better from there. And there's a lot of that core gameplay loop I mentioned earlier with another game that I think fits really well here, where it's really satisfying to turn the tables on somebody. It has a nice flow of like you do the story and then you go collect evidence, and then there's the trial component where everything really feels like it matters, and then it ramps up at the end and there's dramatic stuff at the end. There's not a whole lot else to say about it. We've talked about it a lot. It's the reason this whole network is named what it is, so I don't think we have to go into it a ton. But if you enjoyed one, I don't see any reason why you shouldn't continue.
I'm imagining that Miles stops being an adversary, right?
I don't know, Dave. You're going to have to play it and find out.
Because having him on the opposite side felt really satisfying when I beat him, because he's so smarmy. It felt good. So I mean, if I can continue.
Well, he was already like you. So you beat the first one, so it was already like he was replaced. By that
much more evil guy who was just like, you're an awful, terrible person. I just want to actually.
Who does the snap, which is like really cool. Yeah, I mean, so my only debate would be, I wouldn't want to recommend 2. I really don't think 2 is very good. There's like 1 and 1.5 maybe good cases in 2. That's my concern. Whereas 3 is excellent the whole way through, and 3 only barely references 2. So I'm like torn on which one to do.
Play 2.
Well, it worked out when I played Red Dead 1, so.
Here's my thing.
That's true.
Since we have to have some vitriol between me and Shaun at some point, otherwise we lied in the opening of the episode, I think that stuff about the mediocre Phoenix Wright cases is so overblown. I enjoy my time with the characters no matter what, so yes, like the final case of the third game is like, fingertips good compared to everything else. I'm not saying that there aren't highs and lows. I enjoy the dumb little cases, especially because they're not really tied to big stakes. If those dumb cases were happening while there were major things going on with the characters, then I'd be like, okay, this is stupid. Like, I don't want to investigate a circus when somebody else from my group is missing. That would be dumb. And I'd be like, stop it. We're not taking this seriously. But like the whole series isn't meant to be taken seriously for the most part. When it gets serious, obviously, the stakes are high and it feels great. But Phoenix is a goofball. Everybody in his fucking entourage is weird. His opposing prosecutors are as weird as it gets. Like, all of it is just kind of like enjoy the ride. Because each of these cases is only a couple of hours. It's not like the investment in 2 is going to set you back 50 hours like a full-blown RPG would. And because you have played 1 long ago, I think 2 would be a nice way to ramp up into 3 as opposed to just jumping into 3, missing 2, and having not played 1 in a while. That's my argument.
Yeah, no, that's true. And you will get a little more out of 3 if you play 2. It's not a lot, but especially near the end, it becomes that much better because you spent the time, you know all the characters. And the last case in 2 is very good.
Yeah. And the second case in 2 is good.
Actually, you know what? I think my beef, I just don't like the first case in 2. And then it doesn't get a lot better than that and then until the end. The first case really left a bad taste in my mouth.
The first case in 2, and I'll just spoil this for you right now, Dave, because if you're going to play it, you'll get into it quickly, is they hadn't figured out a good way to do the what if this is the first game someone has played in the series yet, and as a result, he just gets amnesia. It's the first thing that happens, so I don't really feel like I'm spoiling much.
No.
So he's basically fumbling through a trial, and it's like, how is he even allowed to be on the bench right now? Like, he's clearly having some problems.
This series doesn't have to make sense when they introduce the justice system of, well, if you can't prove he's innocent in 3 days, he's guilty. Like,
I gotta tell you, every time they're like, but can you prove he's innocent? And I'm like, I don't have to. This is bullshit.
Reasonable doubt.
The burden is on the prosecution, goddammit.
And they're like, the prosecution wins like 99% of the cases. I'm like, well, in this setup, I can see why.
When the bad guys themselves are like, but can you prove it? Like, what the fuck, man? So yeah, that's. But I still love it because sometimes it's a little cartoonish, sometimes it's a little silly. But I think about what it would take to write a game like that. And have it be interesting both on the turning tables and making it exciting and doing these revelations in the back and forth. And I'm like, that is tough. Like major kudos to the writer of this. It's not typically what I would refer to as someone being an expert writer, but in this case, I really do feel that way.
And it's probably worth it just to see Phoenix looking dejected, because that was one of my favorite parts when he got something wrong and he's just like,
yeah.
I mean, it's all great. I love the slapping of the papers
so
against his
cute.
hand, and the pointing obviously is iconic. Yeah, to Shaun's point, I mean, these are essentially visual novels. There is more gameplay in them than that, but effectively, at the end of the day, it's about this story that's relatively linear. And despite the fact that you don't have a ton of choices, whether it's gathering evidence or presenting it in court, I never really felt railroaded, and I think that's a testament to how well written and how engaging the games are. I mean, it might be one of the series' greatest strengths.
I'm always for, like, basically a playable graphic novel. I'm all for it. Those things are fun. Like, I like Telltale games for that reason, even though sometimes they're ridiculous.
And that was almost my hesitancy, is because your next one is 2. And I was like, well, 3 is really good. I'd love you to play 3, but then you have to get through 2. 4 is very good, extremely good beginning, very good end, and kind of okay in the middle.
Let's be honest, though, that's kind of true of all the games.
That is kind of true of all the games.
There are exceptions, but overall, the bookending cases, because they're the most important to the primary story, are usually the huge successes in them.
5 is very good. Might be the best from beginning to end game in the whole series.
I'd agree with that.
And then 6 definitely is. I love 6. I like 6 more than most, I would say, weirdly enough, but I really like 6.
And then we're cut off.
And now I don't know when we're ever going to get another one, if we are going to get another one, but yeah, but what's nice, if you do play 2, Dave, you can kind of do like 1 is your portable game, and then like one of the other ones recommended is like your big like time investment at home game.
Mm-hmm.
I know that line gets blurred now with the Switch, but still.
Yeah, it's true.
Well,
that's it. I have more recommendations, but you know what? I'll just save them for next time. I think we've given you enough to last you a little while, especially if you're playing through Royal entirely.
Oh, and if I just played through all the ones you recommended, we'll do this again next year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, next year, right? In the next 5 years, maybe.
But
hey, proven my worth here.
You have.
For the sake of adversarial relationships, though, gun to your head, which one would you pick to start right now?
Start right now. Strangely enough, it's probably Skyrim.
Yes, I
Fuck.
I did it.
And which is funny because I think Shaun's argument of Final Fantasy 12 was probably the one that appealed to me most. But I am so angry at Final Fantasy for taking away from what I love so much about 10 and even 9. Like I love 10's battle system the most. 9 was great, and you just deviated from that completely. And so I'm kind of pissed off at him.
Not too bad in 12 though. Like you don't feel it too much in 12, especially nowadays when you see how far off it's gone.
That's fair.
But yeah.
Even 10-2 was just like a dumpster fire.
Yeah.
Hey, the battle system in 10.2 is one of the few good things it has going for it.
What, dress up sphere time?
No, but the quickness of it, chaining attacks together, stuff like that, that was all well executed. I don't know about playing dress up with your party, but that was one of the few things I would actually go to bat for about 10.2. Everything else...
I think it's a bad sign, too, that I was thinking like 12, deviating from 10 and 15, and I forgot about 13. It left such a low impact, I didn't even remember it. 13 is bad. 13 has a good 10 hours in it at the end of the game. So if you can make it that far, the last 10, 15 hours, dog's being idiot.
It's fine.
It is really good, but it takes forever to get there.
She hates 13. Well, before we get barked to death, that's the end of this episode. We'll see what David ends up following up on. We'll check in with him. We'll see. Royal's going to take him 110 hours, so we'll check in 2021. And until then, or until next week, you can find us at our website, objectionnetwork.com, or at youtube.com/objectionnetwork, where we promise we won't yell at your dog like we yell at ours. We'll see you next time.